Thank you for browsing page 121. Today we're going to go into the Dungeon Master's Guide and look at a magic item that caused a little bit of controversy back in the day. The Cloak of the Manta Ray. This is actually a pretty good magic item. This cloak appears to be made from leather. When it is donned, it appears as a normal cloak until the wearer enters salt water, at which time the Cloak of the Manta Ray adheres to the individual, and he or she appears nearly 90% identical to a manta ray. The wearer is enabled to breathe underwater and move as a manta ray, 18-inch movement underwater, and see the monster manual. The wearer also has an armor class of at least 6, that of a manta ray, and other magical protections or magical armor will improve that armor value. Although the cloak does not enable the wearer to bite opponents as a manta ray does, the garment does have a tail spine which the wearer can use to strike opponents behind him or her, damages 1d6 points, and there's no chance of stunning. This attack mode can be used in addition to other sorts, for the wearer can release his or her arms from the cloak's wings without sacrificing movement if so desired. So it seems pretty straightforward until you start diving into it a little bit. So the cloak itself, when donned, when you enter salt water, then it becomes the magic item, the Cloak of the Manta Ray. You realize what it is. So that begs the question, what happens if you're in freshwater? Does the cloak work as a Cloak of the Manta Ray or not? That was one of the problems we had to deal with. The armor class of at least 6, that of a manta ray, and other magical protections or magical armor will improve that armor value. So if I'm wearing +1 plate, can I leave the +1 plate on under the cloak and add that +1 to my armor class? That's a heck of a question, and we had a hard time deciding that, and actually that's one that still kind of we go back and forth on a little bit. And then the next thing is pulling your arms out and enabling you to make other attacks. So let's take the 3 main problems as we saw them. First off, when you enter salt water, that's when the cloak comes into its own and you do the manta ray thing. Does it work in fresh water? At my table, yes, it does. Once you've used it in salt water. And I realize that manta ray needs salt water to live and everything else. But I think the implication is that you're revealing the power by going into salt water. It's not limited to only being used in salt water. At least that's how I determined it. And my players did agree with that interpretation. And then as far as the magical protections go, at my table, the +1 plate example, no, you have to take the plate off. It doesn't change you. It makes you look like a manta ray, but it doesn't say anything about actually changing you into a manta ray. In fact, it mentions your being able to pull your arms out. So I ruled it that while you can look like the silhouette of a manta ray, it's not changing you into a manta ray. Therefore, your stuff, it's not like a polymorph where your items would merge into your body and become part of the disguise. So I said no, you can't wear plate or chain, any kind of heavy armor under it. I do allow leather and magical leather at that. So if you had +1 leather, then yes, I would allow you to gain the +1 for your armor class in that case. I also take away dexterity movement from your armor class because it doesn't say anything about you being able to actually dodge and things like that. I know there's an argument to say that it does, but since you're not used to that environment, I don't allow dexterity to affect your armor class. And then as far as the pulling your arms out of the wings and attacking, I do allow that, but only with short weapons like a dagger. Or I guess arguably a short sword, but you couldn't swing the short sword. I only allow you to stab with it because of the restriction of moving your arm through water, even with a device that's heavier like a sword. You just can't get the energy. You would need free action for that, and the cloak does not give that. So really, the Cloak of the Manta Ray gives you the ability to swim at 18 inches, breathe underwater, and disguise yourself as a manta ray, but you don't become a manta ray. It's a good magic item for that, but it did cause a lot of controversy at our table for quite a few years. We only had 2 of these in our campaign in the early 80s when this was really a big deal, and I had one of them. So as a player in the game, we talked about what the limits would be, and we agreed on basically everything I've just said, because that is how I had DM'd it prior. And my players agreed that, yeah, it's not really a polymorph. It makes you look like a manta ray. Now, I'm open to interpretation that it does polymorph your items into your body, but that's not what it says to me. That's just how I am. And as far as swinging your weapon and stuff, if you had some type of free action, like a ring of free action, I would allow you to swing your sword underwater. But other than that, you still have all the restrictions of a normal person underwater. So let's take a look at how much the cloak is worth on the experience point table. All right, Cloak of the Manta Ray. Okay, Cloak of the Manta Ray, right there. The Cloak of the Manta Ray is 2,000 experience points, right there. 2,000 experience points, 12,500 for sale. Great item if you're going to be doing any kind of seagoing campaign, because salt water, it activates it, it comes into its own. And in fact, that's what my character did. It was my character who was a ranger, and we were aboard a ship, and I had gotten the cloak during the course of the adventure, and we identified it, I found out what it was, and I was able to use this to very good effect, jumping over the side of the ship and swimming over the enemy ship and stuff like that, and then pulling myself up the anchor chain and all that, the fun hijinks you do in D&D. I was able to do that because I was basically disguised as a manta ray. We did have a funny moment where someone aboard one of the ships I was trying to do this to saw the manta ray in the water and threw a harpoon at it. And he did hit me and do some damage. It was just a fun moment that the DM threw in. I thought it was a lot of fun. But I do allow these to, after they've been used in salt water, I do allow them to use them in fresh water, like a lake. But because manta rays are generally pretty big, I don't allow it in any kind of swamp or shallow body of water of any kind. It would have to be at least a river or a lake to really use it, at least at my table. But those are my thoughts on the Cloak of the Manta Ray. Let me know what you've done. If you've interpreted it this way, or if there's something else I missed, I'd be really interested in hearing about it. Also, please take a look at the Patreon, see if you can help me out there, keep the channel going. Please like and subscribe. I want to keep the channel growing. And tell a friend, have them like and subscribe if they enjoy this kind of topic. And let me know any topics that you would want to see. I always look at suggestions. I always take them under consideration. But that's all I've got today on page 121. I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.